5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All systems go. Okay, hello, willkommen, bienvenue, konnichiwa, ni hao, jambo, marhaba. It's time for the Armist Inquisition yet again, episode 245 on Sunday, the 28th of August, 2022. I'm Amish Phil.
I'm Amish Ben.
No, I'm Amish Matt.
Okay, so did that get stuck in the internet pipes?
Silly.
Not very sharp off the get-go there, Matt.
Did it now? No.
You're messing with us, aren't you?
No?
No. Oh, gosh. That's what we need, laggy internet.
Excellent.
Never mind. It'll be fine. And tonight we are joined with our returning guest, Bernie Taylor, author, naturalist, archaeoastronomer. Is that an accurate description, Bernie?
That's pretty good. I love it.
Excellent.
Happy to be back again.
Yeah, it's been too long. We were saying it was, what was it, Matt? 130 something?
136.
Right. So again, yeah, two years ago, roughly. And yeah, it's good to have you back. And I must say, your recent YouTube video is excellent. Like, it's I don't know whether it was like the voice or the something to do with the production quality. It just sort of I was really impressed by it. Was it your voice?
It's not. Of course, it's not my voice.
Oh, you're supposed to say, yeah, of course it's my voice. It's like you pinch that guy who does the trailers for the movies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've got well, I'm doing videos in multiple languages, in French, Spanish, Darija, which is Moroccan, Arabic, as well as English, and a few others. So yes, I have to have other voices that are not mine.
No, but I mean, there's it seems to me there's a real hunger on YouTube for the sort of content that you're doing and the sort of research you're doing. We were mentioning a few other YouTubers that we know of who have been on our show before we started. And would you agree? Is this sort of? Do you think there's a boom in this sort of area?
Yeah, absolutely. I did so my YouTube channel is beforeorion.com. It's all spelled out. People can go look at it. But I did a cooperation with Ancient Geographic a few weeks ago. And he has about 9,000 subscribers, does good stuff. His typical production ran, 1,000 to 2,000 after a few months. And mine was at 8,000 or 9,000 in 2-3 weeks.
Wow.
And so he was doing sort of similar type of content, but he didn't have the images that I give and your very unique narrative. Because some people can say, well, this Bernie's on the fridge, and other people can say he's on the cutting edge. It's two sides of the same coin. But yes, so the people are hungry for this sort of genre of where do we come from? Where do we go? Who are we, and where do we go from here? Because you can't see your future unless you know your past.
That's a great point. And I think what's unique about your take is the way you sort of, I remember from last time we talked and with your book as well, the way you draw mythology and the work of Joseph Campbell and, modern art as well, like the trying to find the correlations between modern art and ancient art as well. And I think that's pretty unique for what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. In this world of sort of archaeology, anthropology, and astronomy, Joseph Campbell, Carl Jung don't exist. I mean, it's just not a thing. And so people believe that they dig something up or they see something in the night sky and they've invented something, they've discovered something, whatever it is. But what Jung said, it's all in our collective unconscious. And what Joseph Campbell said is that that collective unconscious is projected through the stories that we tell. And he referred to the singular myth that all comes from is the monomyth, which is James Joyce actually came up with the word, but we'll give it Joseph Campbell for popularizing. And he said there's this monomyth, there's one story within us all that we've carried with us around the world because it's the story of our existence. It's the story of the personality types within us, which Jung called archetypes.
And this monomyth, from what I remember, isn't Star Wars, what's it called? George Lucas?
Absolutely.
Wasn't he sort of inspired by Joseph Campbell?
Yeah, so George Lucas read The Hero of the Thousand Faces, which was Joseph Campbell's major work. You find that in middle schools and high schools in the United States. And he modeled the Star Wars saga after that, unbeknownst to Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell didn't know that this monomyth was projected into the Star Wars movies until after a few of them came out. And then George Lucas invited him over to the big screen in his home for drinks and a movie. And he's like, whoa, this is what I do. And the characters, this is my call, right? The characters in Star Wars, Yoda is Carl Jung. I mean, it just looks like him, it sounds like him, moves like the whole thing. And then Obi-Wan becomes George Lucas. I'm sorry, because Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell becomes Obi-Wan. And then the Padawan under them is George Lucas, who is Luke Skywalker.
Ah.
Okay, so this is from the mind of Bernie Taylor. It may or may not be true. It's we're either on the cutting edge or on the fringe, but God, it's right in line right there. So Joseph Campbell was telling the story from his great hero, Carl Jung, as George Lucas learned from Joseph Campbell. And so we keep telling the same stories. You can go around the world, you find these great myths that have very similar characters. And there's a hero, there's a demon, there's a damsel in distress, there's some sort of fierce animal they overcome, whether it be a dragon or a lion. And the hero goes on his journey, and he doesn't want to go on his journey, and then he does, and he's assisted by different amulets and spirits and different stuff, and he comes to ultimately face himself or herself, and then returns home to tell this story to set society free. Everybody fundamentally tells that same great story, and Jung said it's because it's part of who we are. Whether or not we go on this great hero's journey where we travel across seas and dance through the stars, we have the same experiences on a more modest scale in our own lives. We leave the family and we leave our mother and father behind. We go off to college, we go to work, we go to war, and then we've answered the call. And that's fundamentally what that's about. And I say that this is not, as Jung said, is that this is not something in the modern age or even the ancient times. This goes back to the core of who we are, and therefore it is the meaning of our existence itself.
Wow. So yeah, like the Star Wars thing is when Luke's on the farm on the Lars homestead, and he gets the call to adventure. He wants to join the rebellion, this thing that he's heard about, and he sees himself as living in this backwater planet, doesn't he? With two sons.
Absolutely, that's really it. Yeah, and we all take that that hero's journey, and somewhere or another. And if we fail to answer the call, you spend the rest of your life in your parents' basement, playing video games. And there's nothing wrong with spending time at home, living with your family. But if you never get a job and you never go to school, you never do anything but sit in your parents' basement, your life has ended right there because you failed to answer any sort of a call.
Do you think if we went back, say, 40,000 years when we were living sort of hunter-gatherer society in small clans, that sort of thing, do you think that call to adventure narrative would have been used then to sort of encourage young adults to go out and explore and maybe try and contact or intermarry with other local tribes, that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So in today we're gonna do like 12 to 18,000 years ago. But in other work, most of my presentations prior to 6 months ago were based on 40,000 years ago. And in that time period, half of the Greek constellations were actually observed, formed, and given mythological characters. And in that story, you have a boy who is Orion. He goes on this journey and he travels through the night sky and he encounters different animals along the way. And the first one he encounters is an eagle, which is the constellation Agalar. He encounters a horse, which is Pegasus. Combined together gives the Pegasus wings. And he goes on this journey and he fights a lion, which becomes the Nemean lion in Greek mythology, and so many different characters. And all these are constellations in the night sky in the exact same order as we have them inherited to us today. So people were around the campfires and they were looking at the night sky, and they knew where they were in time and space by looking at these constellations. They knew what seasons it were. They knew geographically where they were, because each of the animals depicted in the cave art for that time period also designates the place. So there's a giraffe, therefore you're in Africa. There's a lion with a mane, you're in Africa. There's a Iberian lynx, which is different from a caracal, which is an African lynx. So you're in the Iberian Peninsula. There's all these distinct animals that told them where they were. But it's also this narrative. And this is, I'm a guy's guy. This is kind of a guy's guy podcast, right? Okay. But I'll explain. One thing happens in this narrative is that as the hero takes his journey and he goes through all these constellations of animals, all those animals, except the lion, are female.
Really?
And so he gains the strength of the female side on his journey. And when he returns back again, he becomes this Hercules, the constellation Hercules. And Hercules is a huge constellation. Yeah. And how Hercules is on this panel is overlaps all the other constellations, so that when he returns as the complete man in Hercules at the end of his journey, he's encapsulated all the female energies in him. Okay. So Joseph Campbell didn't know that, but this narrative, I just explained it, but he recognized that in mythologies around the world. And he said that it was always the female was always in the supportive role of the male. But in the Jungian sense, you would say that the male and the female become the complete whole. Someone wrote a book. It was a female mythologist, something like that. And she wrote a book about how Joseph Campbell was a sexist, okay, because he doesn't talk about female heroes. But she completely missed the point. Yeah. She totally missed the point, is that the complete man is the one who has both the male and female energies. And that's the essence of being a guy's guy in a more complete world.
Well, she'll be happy now because all the heroes are female, it seems, over the last couple of years.
Well, all the Disney heroes are female, yeah. So it's awesome. You got Moana, right, the Hawaiian hero. You got Mulan, the Chinese hero. There's no more Cinderellas and Snow Whites and all that stuff anymore. But it's cool because the hero archetype, in some sense, is developed around the social structure of the time. And many moons ago, for a very long time, it was the male was the dominant character in society, and the women managed the home. But by managing the home, she also managed the development of the boys and girls until they reach a certain age. But the Paleolithic cave art tells us that they recognize that to be the complete person, you just can't be, the guy with a club banging someone on the head. You have to be able to listen to other people. You have to care for your clan. You have to do many things, Yeah, and you can still be a guy's guy.
Well, it's like the 12 tasks. I mean, it's not all slaying, is it? There's like sweeping up, clearing the stables and stuff like that going on, isn't there? The 12
absolutely.
Tasks of Hercules, that is.
Absolutely, yeah. And the labor. So the only slaying in the Upper Paleolithic cave art that we see of the hero is of the lion, and it becomes the Nemean lion. All the other one, the hero merges with the animal. So the hero merges with the horse to become like a centaur, merges with the eagle become a bird man, right? Or merges with the
person.
I mean, it really is merges with the female giraffe and hides behind the neck of the giraffe. It merges with the female whale and actually is in the belly of the whale, what also becomes the Jonah and the whale story. So absolutely, it's a so yes, it has come around to get again in a more modern sense. My daughter's going to be a senior in college, and she is I would say she's a fully integrated person. And she loves sports. She rock climbs. But she's also a scientist at school, and she has girlfriends and friends that she hangs out with. So she's that, and that is the benefit that we have of Mulan and Moana and all the other modern Disney female heroes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's room for everything.
Is room for Well, I got to tell you a story because this is a really creativity story. I'm 50, almost 57 now.
Get away.
And when I was in my late 20s, I went on a bachelor party trip. This is Oregon. So, okay. So I put it out to the audience. I live in Portland, Oregon, which is on the west coast of the United States or northwest of the United States. And this bachelor party was a float down a river called the John Day. And John Day is high desert. It's real hot, except for the water that's cold. And we floated for 3 days down the river. We had two rafts. And, so you can imagine what, first day of a bachelor party, how does it go, right? We know how it goes, right? We went fishing. We drank a lot of beer. We got dehydrated. Day two, we're just like, when is this over? And we have a lot of miles left of the river, like a lot of miles left of the river. Okay.
This sounds very familiar.
And we're looking at we're kind of looking at the mountains as they go by, because this is kind of a deep canyon sort of thing. And there's a mountain that looks like a naked woman. And so I wasn't the first one to recognize it, but I was certainly by the second or the third. And then someone said, God, that looks like a naked woman. And so another, yeah, I saw that too. And what we were looking at was pareidolia in the mountain of a naked woman. It looked like a naked woman. Now, we got back to, ultimately got back home. And we all survived, no rattlesnake bites and all that sort of stuff. And someone looked up the map. It turned out it was called Squaw Mountain. And that's what the Indian woman was called by, white guys. Okay. Squaw Mountain. And it was an Indian name mountain, because all the other mountains that are named by white people are named after, generals, colonels, whatever, that killed Indians. I mean, that is the predominant strain of the mountains in the Pacific Northwest. They're all Indian killers. My daughter went to elementary school, Ewing Young Elementary School, and he was a blatant Indian killer without any reason for it. And he became this pioneer hero. So this is the thing. And, so anyway, this mountain was called Squaw Rock or Squaw Mountain. And we all recognize the same pareidolia because it sort of jumped out to us. Now, a chimpanzee can't see that same pareidolia. We could have had, a bunch of chimpanzees in the rafts with us, and they wouldn't have seen it. They could have got drunk as hell, dehydrated as much as we were, but they were never going to see Squaw Mountain, or as we saw Squaw Mountain. So there's something that separates us from chimpanzees and other animals, that we can see pareidolia, and from that pareidolia, we can recognize figures that make sense to us.
I was going to say, the term pareidolia is probably alien to most of us listening. So you should probably explain what that actual effect is and how it works.
So how it works, and there's a part of our brain that sees that mountain, and it finds recognizable characters within that, even if the characters are not real. When we look at the night sky, we see, most of us can see, if you look at Orion, it kind of looks like a man or a woman. It looks like a human form, but it's not a man or a woman or any type of human form. It's our unique ability to make patterns in the unreal. We look at the clouds, and some people might see a horse, some people might see a bunny. There's no horses and there's no bunnies in the clouds. But that's something that is pareidolia in itself. Now, Picasso said something about pareidolia. And he said, it occurred to man to create his own images. It's because he discovered them in the world around him, almost formed, already within his grasp. He saw them in a bone, in the irregular surfaces of cavern walls, in a piece of wood. One form might suggest a woman, another a bison. What Picasso is saying is that art itself came from pareidolia. So people saw Squaw Mountain and then reproduced Squaw Mountain.
Great. So it's like the inspiration. It's like, oh, that's a representation of a human that's occurred in nature. Maybe I can create my own.
Exactly. Now, Picasso also said he saw that in the cavern walls. So he saw a crack in the cavern walls and he said, well, that kind of looks like a mountain. That kind of looks like a deer. And he said that the cave artists founded art by finishing the lines in the crack to make other animals. So the origins of creativity, according to Picasso, is founded in pareidolia, which is unique to us. Now, for the listeners out there, for the audio listeners, we're gonna throw 4 or 5 slides up, and I'm gonna describe the slides. You can go on the YouTube channel to see them, or you can just kind of like, just hang. So we're gonna drop the first one is slide
5.
Slide. Yeah, it's slide 5. Okay. Now, slide 5 is an image most people are familiar with. Actually, half of it is. Half of the image is Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. They're 5 half-naked women, suitable for our conversation today. Pre-end the podcast itself.
Not sure that one in the top right's a woman, is it? It's
Well,
like you, Ben.
So they have masks on. Now, 2 of these women have clear masks on. And it was always a question of where Picasso got the masks from. And many people say he stole, he stole them from a museum, or his friend stole them from a museum, the Louvre actually. And but no one has ever been able to show the masks that Picasso used on the faces of these 2 women. And this Les Demoiselles d'Avignon also has a sort of like jagged, kind of rocky stuff behind him, as if you're in a cave. Yeah. Now, the other image that the audience can look at, that you've probably never seen, is from the Altamira cave. And if you go online, the Altamira cave, 35,000 years ago. And there are 2 irregularities in the rock that the cave artists touched up with black charcoal. And by the black charcoal then makes these masks or faces of horses, apparently, because it's kind of elongated. And those touched up irregularities on the cave wall in Altamira are exactly the same as the 2 masks that Picasso has in his Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. Now, Les Demoiselles d'Avignon is a very significant painting, I should say. It's in the Museum of Modern Art in New York right now. You can find it online everywhere. But it was Picasso's break from traditional art, and it is indistinguishable as the rupture moment for modern art. Okay, so this style became Cubism, which is everywhere now, but Picasso, we can see that he lifted, and by the way, he never gave credit to the cave artist, but he literally lifted these 2 masks and put them on the 2 characters in Les Demoiselles d'Avignon to create this incredible moment. Now, one of Picasso's good friends, I mean, I'm not saying like everybody has good friends and everybody has friends, okay, not really friends. And one of his good friends said, one day we're going to find Picasso has hung himself behind his great canvas, because this was so far out there that it was just so disruptive, and it was so ghastly, it was so gory in a way it made no sense. That what could the future of this be? And the future is the past, the past that Picasso, the quote we had from.
Now, he was Spanish, wasn't he? And Altamira is in Spain, isn't it? I mean, was he known to have visited these places?
So Picasso was Spanish from the south of Spain. As an adult, he spent most of his life in France. Oh. And he was known to visit caves. And as soon as the cave opened up, Picasso was in there. And in terms of Altamira, he was known to be there. And in fact, he was known to be there just a year or two before Les Dames Avignon was painted. And
Busted.
so how did Picasso get there? Well, the cave was actually, I don't want to say discovered, but it was opened up in the late 1800s. And there was some question that it was fraud, because the idea was caveman couldn't create these incredible images.
Yes.
And there was also, but the problem was there were animals in there that had been extinct in Europe a long, long time ago. And apparently they knew before humans had been there. And there was also the question of, why is there no soot on the ceiling of Altamira? How did they? They
had torches, didn't they? Battery power? No.
Well, if you're heating up oil, if you're heating up wood, or straw or something, you'd have soot on the top of the ceiling. And there was a movie about this called Finding Altamira, starring Antonio Banderas, who also played Picasso in a series made by Ron Howard. And in the Finding Altamira, they figure the family that sort of made this discovery, if we're going to call it that, figures out how they did it. But after the hero of the story is like totally, thrown out the window, disparaged. And if you heat bone marrow, it doesn't give soot.
Wow. So
it was bone marrow.
And what did they use that for torches as well?
Like candle, wouldn't it?
Well, they didn't use it. Well, they didn't use it for torches, was because what they did is they had these, and we have the archaeological evidence of these like wooden spoons, or we have wooden spoons and we have shells that they would have melted it in. And they walked around like this sort of thing, right? So yes, why there's no soot is because they're burning the bone marrow. And so Picasso came out of the cave. Well, he was sent into the cave to see if they were fakes, maybe because it's a pretty small art world, right? And he came out and he said, none of us could have done anything like this. So that means he or any of his friends were making art like this. And so it was a completely different style, a different look. And before this, Picasso was doing, a boy in the field holding the reins of a horse. And then pretty much everybody was doing something like that. And then you jump to Les Dames Avignon, which is just like this rupture moment. It's absolutely, it's just nutty, and hang himself behind the canvas. So Picasso comes out and he says, none of us could have done anything like this. Okay. And so, but what's important about this is Picasso and the origin of creativity is that Picasso recognized that it was the irregularities in the rocks that they founded the images from. That it was pareidoia. He didn't use the word pareidoia, but it was the pareidoia that it jumped. It's the rocks spoke to the artists, and from them they gave it life. And that's so Picasso never. The rest of his life, Picasso never tells where the source for the masks were, and he used other masks from Altamira in other paintings, and he uses other characters from upper cave art in paintings as well. So was he a forger?
Well, copyright must expire after about 30,000 years, doesn't it?
Yeah, so the copyright does expire. What was he
yeah, I don't see a signature in that cave.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, yeah. So it's kind of it's a tough call. And Picasso never, he died $30 million in his name or something, and he, that's how he made his money. He was a businessman. He was not an academic who had any obligation to cite his sources.
Wow.
But as me and my buddies were years ago, it was, I was at younger days, the bad old days, floating down the river on this bachelor party. We saw what Picasso saw because we're human. We're not chimps, and we have that ability.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, wonderful.
Yeah. So that's the little bit of Picasso.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's another image you guys are gonna pop up now, and It is number 35.
Whoa.
So we're jumping, we're jumping like through seasons. And this is I'm going to describe this for the listening audience. So we have a mountain in Spain called Pico Panamera. And Pico Panamera is also called the Little Matterhorn because when you see it from a different perspective, it looks like the Matterhorn in the Alps. And it also makes the local mountain climbers feel good that they're climbing the Matterhorn. And then next to that image, you have a bear with a cub on its head. And this is an actual cave art image from Las Chimeneas cave in the north of Spain, which is close to Altamira. I mean, you could walk it in a few days.
Right. And is that mountain close by as well?
The mountain is about, it's within, you could walk it within a week. Yeah. Especially fit guys like you guys could do it. So yes, the mountain was within a week walk. And then there's another image. The third image is actually an outline drawing of the cave art image. So you can see the actual characters and you can see this cub on the top of the mother bear's head. There's a little bird in the front.
Yes, I can see it now.
So you can see it now, right?
Yeah.
And it's actually pretty cool. And so we're looking at, and the cave art image has a lot of white around it. And so it's depicting sort of snow. Right? Gives that feel of it. Now we can compare the cave art image to the mountain Pico Panamera, and they're almost identical. In fact, you got the muzzle of the bear, and you almost got the features of that cub on top of the head. So there's a few possibilities here. One possibility is that aliens saw the cave art images and they went to the mountain and carved it out with lasers.
Solved. End of podcast.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks very much.
Yeah, move on. Which slide are we going to now?
One possibility. And these aren't
right.
ancient aliens. These would be prehistoric aliens. New series for a show, right? Prehistoric aliens. Okay. Definitely. So that is one possibility. Okay.
Did they build that house as well?
Yeah, exactly. Another possibility is that the cave artist saw the mountain. The mountain was important to the cave artist because it looked like a bear and with a cub on top of the head. And then the cave artist said, well, why don't I put that onto the wall of this cave? I'm just going to pick any spot and, any wall, fresh spot, like a canvas, I'm going to put it on there. That's a second possibility. So in more, we, had my friends and I, we came back and we could have sketched out Squaw Mountain, right? I mean, that would have been possibility too. Now there's a third possibility that the cave artist was familiar with that important Pico Panamera, looking at as a bear with a cub on top of its head, and then was searching in the cave and looked for a similar geometry in the rocks that had the appearance of that mountain. So that the cave artist was looking for pareidolia in the same way that Picasso found it at Altamira. He was looking for rough features, wasn't identical, and then he fills in the rest. And the fill in the rest on this particular image is you've got a bunch of black lines, you've got the white on it, and you got some brown paint.
Right.
And so the artist found the terrestrial world in the cave itself.
Can I?
And in Basque.
Sorry, Bernie. Can I pause a hypothetical?
Sure.
Can we imagine a lad who grew up at Pico Panamera?
Yep. If you say it quick in Spanish, no one can tell the difference.
Pico Panamera. And,
there you go.
So imagine a lad growing up there with his tribe and hunting and gathering and being intimately familiar with that landscape, and that mountain obviously being an important role in the sort of psyche of ancient peoples. And then when he comes of age at 17 or 18, he gets sent on a hero's journey. And he goes exploring and ends up contacting another tribe, maybe say a week's walk away for a fit lad.
Yeah.
And then he sees the pareidolia and it reminds him of his childhood, and that's what inspires him to finish the drawing.
Or he's saying someone's asked him where he's from and he's trying to explain it to the near that mountain that looks to me like a silverback gorilla on the left. But I'm thinking that in 20,000 years there would have been a significant amount of erosion. So when this cave illustration was made, it could have looked subtly different.
Yeah. So you'll have significant erosion, but you got to get a big size mountain. It doesn't change it that much. So there's actually a fourth option.
Oh.
A fourth option, and it's not Bigfoot. So let's pop up slide 52.
52 coming right up. I've overshot.
52. So we got an option number 4. And option number 4 is on one side of the screen here for the audio audience. We have some constellations, and the bottom of that constellation is Ursa Major, the bear, the mother bear, the she bear, and her rear paw is right on Mother Earth, terra firma. And then we have 3 other bear images, and these all come from caves in that area. And one of them is our Las Chimeneas bear with the cub on the hair, and the other 2 feature mother bears and cubs. And so we'll go with that for anybody out there in podcast land. And what we have is the mother bear in actual reverse of the she bear in the night sky. Now, when I created this constellation image, it is in the wintertime, late winter. It's an easterly view as Ursa Major would have been first seen as it first rose into the night sky into the dawn. So what the artist did was they first had this as a constellation. Okay? They first saw Ursa Major, the constellation, the she bear of the night sky. Then they recognized that constellation as kind of looking like the bear in the mountain. And then what they did was they went into the caves and they looked for sort of pareidolia-like features that they could fill in the blanks. Now, there's something very interesting about all 3 of the she bears in these cave images, is that they all face to the viewer's left, and they're all trapped in time. And I would say they're trapped in time because Ursa Major, the constellation, is moving from left to right, and these bears the mountains can't move, so they've reached the extent of their left. Okay, so why would the bears be, these 3 bears, the mountains and the cave art, be looking from right to left, whereas the Ursa Major is, as we see in the Greeks, is from left to right? It's because if you go around the world, people see Ursa Major constellation, but they all don't see it the same way.
Yeah. And
as Ursa Major travels through the seasons, the constellation moves around and people come up with their own narratives. And so what I would say is that in this case, they had Ursa Major in the night sky. And then they found it in the terrestrial world, and then they put it into their underworld. And this became all part of the mythology. Now, this image is of the first one we had with the bears is about 19,000 years ago. I have the same Ursa Major in line with all the other Greek constellations going back to 34,000 years ago. Wow. So it didn't start here. It started somewhere else where we observed Ursa Major, and then they as they went along, they kept finding new mountains and then caves to put these images in.
Now then, Bernie, just a quick sort of ancient animal question. Obviously, we have bears in North America, big bears, and we have some bears in Asia and stuff. In this sort of time frame in Europe, would there have been bears around?
Yeah, absolutely. There were 3. Let's call them, I'm not sure the word subspecies, but we're going 3 subspecies. One is the Eurasian bear. The next second is the Cantabrian bear, and the third is what people call the cave bear. We don't have any cave bears to compare it to, so we can't say. So the first image that I showed you is the Cantabrian bear. The second one is the Eurasian bear, Eurasian brown bear, and I would say the lower image on this one, the audio audience can't see, would then be the cave bear. So we can actually see now what the bear looked like then at that time, the cave bear, other than skull and bones, right? And what if anybody can remember, visualize in their head Ursa Major constellation. You have a tail. You have a tail. Well, there's no tails. Bears don't have tails. It doesn't matter where you're on the world. Bears don't have tails. Okay, but if below the tail in Ursa Major would fit nicely the heads of all these bears looking in the opposite direction in the caves. It would fit perfectly in there, and the rear legs work as well. Wow. For the cave art bears. So they saw the bear, coming out of a cave, but was stopped at the door, at the cave entrance, and then moments later, the bear disappears into the daylight.
So have we got it back? Did the Greeks get it back to front then? The depiction of the.
Well, so the answer to that is the Greeks just reversed it.
Yeah,
they just reversed it. But we Native Americans have it reversed as well, as reversed to what the Greeks have, and then the same as this. And Native Americans have it that the bear actually turns, because the bear goes up into the night sky, turns around, and kind of comes down again. And so there's people created their own stories within these pareidolia, constellations in the night sky. It's all created through pareidolia. Without our ability to see pareidolia, we could never travel through the night sky. Chimps you put a chimp in a spaceship, all they can do is look out the window. Okay. They have no idea what's going on out the window. Or the portal, I guess the portal out the window.
That's such a great point. Like, without this sort of innate ability of pareidolia, ancient seafaring, navigation, all that stuff goes out the window.
Yeah,
never would have happened.
Wow.
And it's not just seafaring, it's traveling across terrestrial. Because these people, 19,000 years ago, and 34, of course, 1,000 years before them, I'm not going to say they didn't have canoes of some sort. I'm not going to say it. But they're traveling across land with these same constellations. And the constellations, as I said earlier, they actually traveled land and sea, short stretches of sea. But the constellations mimic the animals in their terrestrial or aquatic space. So everything's connected. So who are the people who are here now, or sort of left from when the Spanish arrived? They're the Basque. Yeah. And if you know anything about Basque, it's one thing. It's that they're separatists. Okay. I said that's it. I mean, and that's the story of Guernica, right? The story of Guernica. The Basque was separatists from the Franco regime. The Basque have, the second thing, if you know anything about Basque, is that Basque have their own language that is not connected to the other languages in Europe. So the question is, well, where did the Basque language come from? No one knows.
Oh, so what? Sorry. So the Basque language isn't derived from Latin or Greek or the Romance. It's completely separate, is it? Completely
separate. And it's not connected to any Indo-European languages.
Whoa! No, I was talking about this on Friday night. There's only a handful of languages in Europe that aren't derived from the Indo-European.
There's only one.
Hungarian.
It's the Basque.
Hungarian, I think.
But you can connect it. So the Basque is totally distinct. So were these people? Were these people Basque? Were they Basque? And we're going to, and they've had this in their culture all along. So the Basque, we don't know when the Basque arrived, because there's no record of the Basque, but we actually have bear traditions in Basque mythology. The Basque believe they came from bears.
Wow.
They came from bears. The bears are their brothers and their sisters. And when the Basque came, so I would argue Basque came from the western part of North Africa. Okay, that's what my theory is. And when they arrived, they would have come to the caves, and they would have seen some cases with claw marks of the bears. So the bears were the first artists. Okay, they saw it in the caves. They saw it on on the trees, bears were the first artists that they could see. So the bears were there first, and therefore they must, if they came after the bears, and therefore they must have came from bears. And that's fundamentally the belief of the Basque people today. And actually in the tradition of the Basque. So we're gonna move to another cave. Actually, we're gonna go to another mountain, and we're gonna pick up slide number 8. Slide number 8.
Okay.
Okay. And for the audio audience, slide number 8 is a mountain. Okay. It's kind of a unique mountain. It's called Chindoki. Chindoki, which is a Basque, of course. Kind of looks like a snail. A lot like a snail. Kind of like the head that pops up the peak of the snail, that sort of stuff. And you can't see other big mountains around it. This is a sacred mountain of the Basque people. They're sort of like great spirit Mari lives in a cave on this mountain, or in this mountain. Okay, and Chindoki is one of Doki in Basque means place. Chin has no origin, no known designation or meaning other than being part of Chindoki. So this is the place of Chin, and Chin is spelled Txin. Okay. So we have a original Basque word. That's this, in fact, mountain. Okay. Versus Picapenmera was a Spanish word that we talked about before there. Okay. And so Basque people still do sort of a kind of sacred climbing of this, as people would, climb,
like
walk to Mecca or
like
something
a pilgrimage,
like that,
yeah.
Like a pilgrimage, yeah. And it's a major mountain in Basque mythology. It is a sacred mountain. Now I'm going to throw in something a little curveball. It's a little off, in a different park. Now there are linguists who believe that Armenian is connected to Basque. Okay, Armenian. And when we're talking about Armenian, we're not talking about the Armenians today per se, but we're really talking about people, and people left Armenia, but we're talking about what's called the Armenian Plateau, which includes Turkey, and where we have Göbekli Tepe and all the other tepes. Okay, so these are linguists say that Basque has very close parallels in many words to Basque, and they have the word chin, and it means bad. Okay, so I personally do not have an opinion on whether or not the Basque language and the Armenian is the same, but there's a lot of literature among linguists that say, hey guys, what the Basque say is, well, there's no archaeological evidence to connect the two. And what the linguists are saying, well, we think the linguists are saying that that agriculture came to Spain or Basque people 7 to 8,000 years ago, and the language came at the same time. That's what they say. And so that the Armenians would then have become the Basque. But what if we can find evidence in the caves, more concrete evidence that predates 8,000 years ago? And all these images we're talking about now the cave images are all prior to 12. So if we can find Basque characters and mythology and language, perhaps, in Basque caves that predates the Armenian agricultural revolution that moved over, that would say that the Basque were first. Okay, so what happened? Everybody knows the story. What happened 11,000 years ago in Armenian Plateau, Turkey?
What happened?
You've had guests there. What did they make?
Oh, Göbekli Tepe, do you mean?
Göbekli Tepe, right?
Yeah.
Okay. There's a bunch of tepes. Göbekli Tepe is kind of the most famous one.
Karahan
But they're all
Tepe.
about 11,000, 12,000 years ago. Okay. There is no big art in that part of the world prior to that. And people say, well, they made it, they invented. So, well, there's a ton of big art in Basque land prior to 12,000 years ago that goes all the way back to 34,000 years, actually 40,000 years ago. there's a precedence of art before it gets to for tens of thousands of years before it ends up at Göbekli Tepe. And what we have now is we have Basque words or Armenian words that can be connected. So that would suggest that the Basque people ended up in Turkey on the Armenian plateau, and they would then become the origins of the Armenian language and the people who built Göbekli Tepe and other tepes, because the Basque come first. They definitely come first. And we've got these words. We have these words. So we're going to go to the next slide, and that's 24.
Sorry, I was so stunned. I was
Actually, next slide is 25. I'm sorry, 25.
25.
We're going to go to slide 25.
Look at Chindoki.
So we're looking at Chindoki now. That mountain kind of looks like a snail, but the cave artists didn't think it looked like a snail. They thought it looked like a mammoth or a mastodon, but actually it's a straight-tusked elephant. And they were straight-tusked elephants in Europe during that period. And it actually looks just, there's an image in the Los Monedas cave, which is in the same part of Spain as the other ones, that is identical with all the features of Chindoki. And I have another one, which we're not going to, and another cave that's exactly the same image. Okay. So we have two of these straight-tusked elephant characters depicted on caves that looked exactly like Chindoki, have all these features. And so what we have is we have a current Basque mountain. We have the same character depicted on two cave walls in two different caves that is identical to that. Now we're going to go to we're going to pick up another slide, and I'll talk our way through it as well. And that's slide number 20. Actually, hang on a second. Pick up slide.
It's a very distinctive mountain, that Chindoki, isn't it?
I think it looks a bit like a bloodhound looking up, but it's only because of the shadows. And that red arrow is right where its nose is, and then it's got its jowls. Mm. Ooh. Not sure there were bloodhounds though back then.
Don't know.
Certainly not getting elephant.
Oh, where's Bernie gone? He's there. It was black screen. I thought he'd disconnected then. It's black background.
Hey, Bernie.
You're right there, Bernie.
Hey. Yeah, I want to get the image in the current storyline as we've been doing our thing. And we're going to pick up image 19. Okay, you guys are good at this. Okay, so what we're looking at here is we're looking at the Chindoki depicted in another cave called in the El Pindal cave, which is the same part of Spain. So we see, in fact, we actually can see more of the trunk. This image has a trunk features as well. And there's a few things unique about this. One is that the trunk features all in gold, and the Basque people believe that Mary is like a spirit or goddess, or however you want to see it, of gold. So when you find Mary, you find the mother lode. Okay.
Mary.
So it's not Mary like Jesus, Mary, Joseph, but it's Mary, M-A-R. We would spell it M-A-R-I. And so it is also a Basque word, as far as we know. And so we find the mountain again in the Basque tradition, which is really cool. And then, and so Mary comes. Also, Mary brings the weather with her. So wherever she goes, she brings. It's so she travels. She travels to two other mountains as well to carry weather. So let's jump to slide 28.
And sorry, I was unaware then. Here we are. 28. Ooh.
Oh, busy.
Okay, now for the audio audience now, what we have is we've gone back to the Lama Natives cave, and it's called the panel mass that we saw the Chindoki the Shindoki elephant
It's the
that
same
matches up with the
Thundercat.
mountain.
It is.
But we've expanded the view, and what we have is on one side of it, we have this character, the bass called Ode, and Ode is the
Odin.
personification of the wind, and Ode is kind of an agent of Mary, and so we have this personification of the wind blowing everything around that's in its midst. So we have at the location that the bass say Mary and Ode should be.
Wow.
And we're going back, I think this is like 15,000 years or so.
And we've got the same mountain there at the top.
Yeah.
It's the same. Yes. And so we've got the mountain, Shindoki, we've got Ode, the spirit of the wind, and we got some other cool characters in there. And there's a bunch of flora, a bunch of different plants, and we can actually identify these plants. And the scene is it's all the plants are marked off in black, and what give the impression that they are a pre-dawn scene or early in the night or something like that, late in the night. And there's a man behind a mask, which is kind of pretty cool. It's actually pretty amazing. And this was previously called the Paddle Mask. And the people who are studying this, they believe that all the characters are masks, that all these things that I'm calling plants, and I can identify all the plants, were masks. But in fact, there's one character who's behind the mask, and there's one character who had these elven sort of ears. But that's the elven in today's vernacular, but my guess I would go with fox.
Yeah, I'm thinking Thundercat. Tigris.
Yeah. It's and he comes up from behind the mountain. He comes up from behind the mountain.
Yeah.
And so this is in present day Basque mythology that predates the Spanish. And predates Göbekli Tepe, and predates the movement of agriculture from Turkey or the Armenian plateau to northern Spain.
And I mean, we're assuming that these guys who made these drawings weren't agricultural, I'm guessing.
No, so agriculture, there's
As far as we
agriculture
know.
means that the cultivation and harvesting of grains is 7,000 to 8,000 years ago. Actually, Göbekli Tepe 11, 12. But in a serious way, 7 to 8, the Neolithic Revolution. But really, so Göbekli Tepe people, 11 to 12 had some sort of, they were cultivating grains.
Yeah.
Now, like in real hunter-gatherer world, they do cultivate plants. So in the Pacific Northwest here, the Native Americans would take 3 camas roots. They'd harvest 3 camas roots. They'd put one in the bag. They'd put one back in the ground where they found it. And they'd put the third one in another location to cultivate another spot. Okay. So is that agriculture? That's how hunter-gatherers do agriculture. So people at this time period were probably doing the same sort of stuff. But what they weren't doing is they didn't have vast fields of grain that someone went through with a sickle and made, mama's bread. And
we're guessing they were probably nomadic as well, do you think?
Well, that becomes nomad's an interesting word that's commonly used. Now, the Native Americans in this part of the world where I live, they used to spend their summers the spring where the salmon came up. They would harvest, and it was moderate temperatures. And as the summer came on, they would travel into the mountains where it was cooler, and they'd harvest other animals and plants. And then in the fall, they'd work their way down again because the animals were coming off of the hills, off the mountains to rut, the deer and the elk. So, and then they'd ultimately come back to the same spot. And so they knew, and then the spring, they'd be same place where the camas were that they had 3. They put one in the bag, one in the ground, and the other in the location. So were they nomads per se that, willy-nilly? No, but it was very scheduled. Scheduled in how they did it.
Nomads relative to us, but it sounds more cyclical.
Yes, nomads. Yeah. But it's not, there's nomads out. There's podcast nomads, they go from one Burning Man type event to another. And yeah. You guys can do that.
Sure.
One day.
Yeah, Burning
Yeah,
Man.
one day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's hot though. Isn't it?
Yeah, it's melting, I believe.
Burning.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of. I don't know. You've been, haven't you, Bernie? You've been burned.
You know,
You've been in
I did 2 virtual Burning Mans during COVID because they were shut down.
Yes.
And so they went online, and I uploaded my material, 2 different videos, and they kind of streamed it through their channels. Yeah.
Focus.
And I also did.
chi.
I also got the virtual glasses, and I got like a virtual skateboard or something, and I surfed around in the village. Yeah, but it's back now. You can go.
I wouldn't trust myself there. I've heard stories.
I'd be right.
What kind of stories?
Oh, I don't know how to phrase this.
There's no way it'd be as bad as Leeds Festival 2002.
Yeah. No, true. Move on.
Okay, so I have a
Bernie,
friend
quick.
who's I have a friend who's an anthropologist, and I have great respect for him. And many moons ago, he went to Burning Man, and he did what people do, and he experienced what people experience, and he felt that he became more creative through the things that he did, the LSD, right? And so he's completely convinced that art itself came through the instigation of hallucinogenic substances. At that time, would have been psilocybin mushrooms. Okay. So what Picasso didn't say it was, not that Picasso knows everything, but Picasso said it was pareidoia. It was our unique ability. Now, if someone was doing mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms, right? Is it possible that they could have seen the bear Ursa Major in the night sky? Absolutely. Even though people had seen it before. You do mushrooms, you can see the bear in the night sky. Okay. Not that actually, by the way, psilocybin's decriminalized in Portland, Oregon itself. So you can do anything you want to do.
Okay, when are we going?
I thought we were already
Guys,
there.
yes. It's like cannabis is too. Cannabis is actually legal. Okay. So could he have seen through psilocybin mushrooms, could he have seen the night sky, seen the Ursa Major as a bear? Absolutely no question. Could he have she could have walked a week on psilocybin mushrooms? I mean, you got to be taking it every 6-7 hours to the mountain. Actually, you could have seen the mountain with the bear, the constellation, right? So we'll call that one location. Could he then have walked a week on psilocybin mushrooms, crawled around in the cave for thousands of meters with a little lamp, found the pareidoia on the wall, and then made these intricate images?
Absolutely. It's called a vision quest. You follow the fox that sounds like Johnny Cash.
Yeah, so the vision, actually, the vision, Native Americans in my part of the world have a vision quest.
Yeah.
But
or
it's
walkabout, they used to call it.
number one is they're not on drugs. They're not on drugs because they've got to walk a far distance. You're going to get hurt. Okay. But they send them out into the cold, dark, rainy night, and without a knife or anything, and they have to kind of scrounge around for a few days, and then they come to the depths of their despair. They look at the mountain and they say, oh, that is, I've now connected with the great Almighty, and that's a vision quest. And they might look at previous cave art, rock art, petroglyphs, and they might make some connection. But if you're on shrooms, you can't walk for a week, and you just can't do it. We can't walk for a day. It's just not gonna, because you just kind of like wobbly, like really drunk.
It's going in circles.
There's no way you're going to be crawling around in the dark of a cave, trying to navigate and finding a crack in the rock that looks like the pareidoia of the constellation and the bear in the mountain.
Oh.
Totally impossible that you can be able to do that. And then you have to actually make it. So we're talking artistry, very Picasso, this is above Picasso's level artistry. So then you've got to pull out your inner Picasso. All these cave artists over tens of thousands of years, pulling out that little Picasso and creating this incredible art, all on psilocybin mushrooms. I don't think so. I just don't. And you're not going to do an LSD, it's a modern creation anyway. It just didn't happen because there's too many steps involved in the process. But what could have happened, going back to what we discussed earlier, was that there was an individual, apprentice, 11 to 13 years old, and he is sent on this journey, and he's got to find the mountain, and at the mountain at the right time of the year, just before the bear, when the bear is rising into the sun. Okay, so it's a specific time of year, and then he has some stories that tell him, or myths that tell him where to go find the cave, and in that cave, he's got to navigate within the cave, and he finds he finds this image. He sees it, and he makes a connection between the upper world and the underworld. Now, in Basque tradition, Basque believe, besides that coming from bears, that the mountains and everything else actually came from the underworld. So they believe there is a connection between the cave art and the mountains and the sky world, because everything emerged from the earth. It all fits together in a tradition. Now, we looked at two images today, two sets of images. One was the bear, and the other was the elephant. And the elephant becomes Taurus in the night sky in the same way as we saw with the bear. I have 10 more of these, so 10 more constellation characters. So they just didn't go to see the bear on the wall. They went to see all these other constellations on the walls as well, that they already knew the mountains, and they already knew the constellations in the night sky. And so it was probably some sort of like a Where's Waldo with 15 different Waldos,
right?
So
do most of these, because I mean the bear isn't in the zodiac, but the other 10 examples you have, are they mainly the ones that we know about, the famous zodiac constellations?
So the answer to that is no. They're I can't think. No, because they weren't interested in the zodiac. Let me explain something. So we're going to go a little astrophysics just for a moment, right? And the Earth wobbles over a 27,000 year period. Okay, wobbles. Yeah. And so the constellations that one would see today would be the same as in the same place you'd see them 27,000 years ago, in the same seasons, I should say, in the same place. But 15,000 years ago, they would be in different seasons.
Right, because of precession.
Now, in this wobbling, what also happens is that some constellations that you saw 15,000 years ago, you won't see today, because they'd be above or below your horizon, your visual nighttime horizon. So constellations would actually disappear. You'd find new ones, but others would disappear. Now, the Greek constellations, as we know them, come from Claudius Ptolemy, and Ptolemy is for 2,000 years was an absolute genius, but in more modern times, people say he's a fraud, and this is the reason why: is Ptolemy recorded constellations that he could never have seen because they're below the visual horizon. So then the question then becomes, well, where did Ptolemy get those constellations from? I would say he got it from the cave, that he had a source that got it from the caves, from a time period when they could see those constellations, because he doesn't describe constellations as we do today, this 12 stars and gamma, beta, alpha with this sort of stuff. He described the animal characters, and in the animal characters, the tail might be one star and the eye might be another. But he couldn't have seen certain constellations that were below the horizon. So he had to have an earlier source, or he had to be, 1,000 miles north or south, which he wasn't. And his sources weren't 1,000 miles north or south either. But his sources, he had a source that they saw the cave images, and they knew constellation characters from an earlier time period.
How much
That's my
earlier?
hypothesis.
Because I mean, if Ptolemy's in Alexandria, he would have had sort of probably ancient Egyptian records going back another couple of 3,000 years, maybe.
Yes, still wouldn't be enough. Still wouldn't be, not to see some of the stars you saw, because he had to be 8 to 10,000 years earlier. Now, here's my hypothesis: is that so Ptolemy was the person that gives us the modern record, comes to the alchemist. But there was a Greek, a much earlier Greek, and his name is Eudoxus. And Eudoxus was about 900 BC, I think, 900 BC. Eudoxus was in the same time period as Plato. They knew each other. They weren't friends. They weren't buds. They didn't do a podcast together. But they knew each other. They both went to Egypt, and Plato met with Solon, the priest, and Eudoxus met with Canopius or something like that. I don't know these Greek words. And from Eudoxus brought back astronomy from Egypt. Okay, and Plato brought back mythical society, Atlantis, right? Now, the same time Eudoxus comes back, he had constellations emerge that are in the Greek record, but are not in the previous Babylonian record. So Eudoxus came up with constellations that there was no previous record in the among the Greeks, but some of those constellations are in the Paleolithic record. So I would suggest that the ancient Egyptians had a source. That source had been to these caves, and they had brought back these much earlier constellations, and they were kept. Now there's, I once said that Egyptians didn't write down anything, but the truth is that the Egyptians priests didn't write down anything. I mixed that one day. They wrote an awful lot of hieroglyphs, tell how to live, how to die, all that sort of stuff. But their scientific knowledge was kept word of mouth among the priests, and so Eudoxus and Plato were both on the Hellenistic period. Alexander the Great conquers the known world, all that sort of stuff, and that was a time period where they could go to Egypt and they could come back again. And for the first time, where the Greeks had writing, so we have this in writing from this knowledge that the Egyptian priests kept secret, brings it back to Greece, and we then gain it in an actual record that we carry on through time. And we have it as Eudoxus is the person, contemporary of Plato in that time period. So Plato heard the same stories. Okay, he probably saw the same information. Plato comes out of it. He says, well, there's this magical mythical society before us, and they had this great technology. Well, the great technology was the constellations that the Greeks didn't have the full record of. And obviously, that we now see today, and goes back to an earlier time period.
Do we know that the cave records are the original source then? Or were there any references to constellations that weren't around 20,000 years ago in the cave paintings themselves?
So the cave paintings are not the original source. Well, they could have been the original source of the Egyptians and perhaps the Phoenicians or somebody else who was the intermediary. Okay, I'm open to that idea. But they're not the original source. The original source was the night sky among desert people in West North Africa. There were nomads who saw them and told these stories for tens of thousands of years before then. But and then what they did was, in North Africa, they found the same pareidolia type of things in mountains that became venerated as their like sort of gods.
Yeah, then we'll start building pyramids and ziggurats.
Yeah, so they saw them in the pareidolia in West North Africa in the same way they saw them in the pareidolia of mountains on the Iberian Peninsula. As people went along, they found new places for the same pareidolia objects or constellations in the night sky. In the same way as my buddies and I were going down the river, we saw Squaw Rock. We weren't the first ones to see, obviously, the female effigy in the mountains. We obviously weren't. It's on the map, right? Can't make it. And we weren't the first ones to ever see an effigy on any mountain the person who named it Squaw Rock wasn't the first one either, because there were people had seen effigies of naked women in mountains all over the world. It's the paradox that we search for and that we keep seeing. Yeah. So the source document is really the night sky connected to the mountains at a much earlier time period that we kept reproducing. Now we've done it in the United States too. Remember Close Encounters of the First Kind? And what do they all dream about?
The mountain, the potato.
The mountain. Do you know? Anybody remember the mountain?
Mount Rushmore?
No, you guys should know. It's we call it now Devil's Tower. Cylinder shape, right? And it's just, and they all not only dream about it, they're drawn to the mountains. That's they're gonna have the moment with the aliens, right? Okay. And really cool movie. Now, among the Lakota Sioux who live in that part of the world, they've had a tradition that in the spring, they travel from one mountain to another, and each mountain is characterized as a constellation. And the last mountain that they go to is what we call Devil's Tower, but they call Bear Lodge. And Bear Lodge to them is what Greek would call the constellation Gemini. So we have this. We have the same tradition. We have the same tradition all around the world. I'm not going to tell you that Gemini is connected to upper Paleolithic cave bars, but I will say that we have this connection between the terrestrial and the sky world among hunter-gatherers through mountains, because that's how we make the physical connection to the night sky.
Yeah, it's everywhere. Look at Uluru. Look at Mount Olympus. Look at the Old Testament.
Do you think the
Mount
Egyptians
Sinai, everywhere?
The Egyptians created artificial mountains then to be more.
What's the Tower of Babel? What's the Tower of Babel?
The pyramids are artificial mountains. 100%. That you're right on. So when the Egyptians stopped making pyramids, they still kept. Well, the pyramid. I would say the pyramids are two mountains in the same way as these upper Paleolithic cave are two mountains, or it's the spiritual two mountains, whether or not there's an actual body in there. Okay. They stopped making the pyramids, and they went to the valley of the Kings. And the Valley of the Kings, they dug into the walls where they created tombs, and they put actual bodies and other things in there. At the peak of the Valley of the Kings, it's a mountain. It's a mountain, and it's a conical shape. A pyramidal shape at the top. So they found. They were making mountains that I believe they pulled from this upper Paleolithic concept. And then when they stopped making pyramids, they found a much easier way to do it by digging into tunneling into these mountains until a mountain, which has the same pyramidal shape at the top. It's the same story. Yeah. Now, we started this off talking about Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung. Carl Jung examined the dreams of many thousands of people. And then the two most common non-organic characters that he found were rivers of transformation or water of transformation. And do we want to guess the other one?
Mountains.
Mountains. There we are. You got mountains. Yeah. So the mountains are our dreams. They're in our unconscious that we can't escape from. And that's why the Lakota Sioux have the same tradition. I mean, it is the exact same tradition as these upper Paleolithic cave artists.
It's really cool. Love this stuff.
It's in our psychology. You guys, you can't. You have a destiny, but your destiny is preordained through all these archetypal characters that form a great myth that you can't escape from.
Well, on that bombshell, Bernie, we've done well over an hour already, and. I'm just conscious of the time and my bladder.
Yeah, we're good. Yeah, so we fully wrapped it up. We covered Burning Man. We covered Squaw Mountain. We covered psilocybin.
Naked women.
Yeah. Naked
mountains.
Anything else?
Something for everyone there.
Bears.
Yeah, that was fun, guys.
Oh, it's been great. It's nice to see you again and go over this stuff. Can't recommend your YouTube channel enough. You know, people should check it out. The link will be in the show notes, as ever. You can keep up with Bernie and find him on social media, on the tweets
Yep.
and the Instas
The socials.
and the boob tubes. I mean, is there any final thoughts you want to leave before we wrap up, Bernie?
Well, we need to have a chat again before we go through another 200 or so episodes.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah, and maybe we can do it next Burning Man.
When is next Burning Man? It's in June, is it?
Burning Man's in August.
Oh, right.
You guys
Oh,
don't know
okay,
that. Yeah. Got to work on it.
Prepping.
Right. Well, it's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
On that note, we shall sign off for this part of the show. And thanks again, Bernie. Stay on the line for us for 2 minutes while we play ourselves out. And check out the links in the show notes. Keep up to date. All right.
Yep. Bye.
Sayonara.